Yeah, you're not going past me without a warrant. Not in this building.
You don't get to tell us how this works.
Then show me something. ID, paperwork, anything.
You're in the way.
No, I'm doing my job.
Last chance. Move.
According to multiple staff and student statements, the agents entered the school just after midday without announcing themselves or checking in at the front office. At the time, Spokane had already seen a surge in immigration enforcement, people being stopped on sidewalks, questioned outside their workplaces, and in some cases, detained without clear identification. But what made this incident different was where it happened. The agents, masked, unidentifiable, and operating without a visible warrant, moved through the building during factive class hours, opening doors, interrupting lessons, and demanding information from staff who had no idea what was going on. Repeated requests for identification were ignored. Questions about a warrant were dismissed. Within minutes, it became clear they weren't there to search the building. They were there for someone specific. And before anyone could stop them, they found him. If you care about stories like this, where abuse of authority gets exposed, make sure you subscribe, because what happened next only got worse. It was a Thursday, just after lunch. Inside room 214, Idris Mathers stood at the front of his class, one hand resting on the edge of a desk as he walked a group of juniors through a writing exercise. He was 34, a U.S. history teacher known for keeping his classroom structured but calm. He didn't raise his voice, he didn't lose control of a room, and most days his students listened. That afternoon was no different until the noise started bleeding in from the hallway. At first, it was just movement, fast footsteps, a door opening somewhere down the corridor, then another. Idris paused mid-sentence, glancing toward the classroom door. A few students turned too. "Stay with the assignment," he said, steady. "We're almost done." The hallway got louder, voices now, not normal school noise, short, direct, unfamiliar. The door across the hall opened. Someone said, "Name." A second voice followed, sharper, "ID, now." A few students shifted in their seats. One leaned toward the window on the door, trying to see out. Then the handle on Idris's door moved slightly, just enough to catch attention, but it didn't open. Footsteps stopped right outside. Idris didn't move from where he stood. His posture stayed neutral, but his eyes stayed on that door. Out in the hallway, a staff member's voice cut in, firm, controlled. "You can't just walk in here like this. Who are you?" No response. Then another voice, lower, colder. "Step aside." "I'm asking you again," the staff member said, louder now. "Do you have a warrant?" A pause. Then, closer to the door this time, "We're not doing this right now." Inside the classroom, the students had stopped working completely. Every eye was on the door. Idris took a step forward, but didn't reach for it. He was listening now, measuring. The staff member outside didn't back down. "You need authorization. You can't be in this building." The sound that followed was sudden and physical. A scuffle, shoes scraping hard against the floor. A student near the door flinched. Then silence. 1 second. 2. And then the classroom door swung open. 3 men stepped in like they already owned the room. No uniforms, no visible badges, faces partially covered. Their eyes moved fast, scanning, stopping, judging. For a second, no one spoke. Then the one in front, Travis Bellamy, locked eyes on Idris Mathers. "That's him," he said, flat. Idris didn't react immediately. He stood where he was, hands visible, posture steady. "Can I help you?" he asked. Bellamy didn't answer the question. He took a step forward instead. "Idris Mathers," he said, like it wasn't a question. "Yes," Idris replied. "Who are you?" Behind Bellamy, Colton Driscoll moved along the side of the room, glancing at students, then back at Idris. Wyatt Ryan stayed near the door, blocking it, without saying a word. Bellamy ignored the question again. "Step forward." Idris didn't move. "I'm in the middle of a class," he said. "You're interrupting." "You need to come with us," Bellamy cut in. A student in the front row shifted in her seat. Another whispered, "What's going on?" Idris kept his voice level. On what grounds? Driscoll let out a short breath, shaking his head like he'd heard enough already. Don't start that. Just cooperate. Idris looked directly at Bellamy. Do you have a warrant? That was the first moment Bellamy's expression changed. Not surprise, annoyance. We don't need to show you anything right now. You're in a public school, Idris replied. You absolutely do. Driscoll stepped closer now, his tone sharper. You always got something to say, huh? Idris didn't respond to that. His eyes stayed on Bellamy. You're disrupting my class without identification, he said. My students are watching this, so I'm asking again, who are you? From the back of the room, a student raised a phone slightly, not obvious, but enough. Ryan noticed. He shifted his stance, watching more carefully now. Bellamy took another step forward, closing the distance between him and Idris. You're making this harder than it needs to be, he said quietly. Idris didn't step back. I'm asking for basic legal authority, he said. Driscoll laughed under his breath. Yeah, figures. Bellamy's tone dropped. You fit the description. That's enough for now. There was a pause in the room. It was subtle, but it landed. A few students exchanged looks. One frowned, another slowly lowered their notebook. Idris caught it too. Description of what? He asked. Bellamy didn't answer. Instead, he reached out and grabbed Idris by the arm. It wasn't aggressive yet, but it wasn't light either. Let's go. That's when Idris pulled his arm back, not violently, just enough to break the grip. No, he said, calm, clear. The room shifted. Driscoll's posture changed instantly. Ryan stepped fully into the doorway now. Bellamy stared at Idris for a second longer, then spoke, louder this time. You don't get to say no. And from the hallway, take your hands off him. Elliot Harrow's voice cut through the tension as he stepped into the doorway and stopped just inside the frame, placing himself between Wyatt Ryan and the rest of the room. Take your hands off him, he said again, louder. Ryan didn't move. Step back, Ryan replied, flat. Elliot didn't. His eyes moved past Ryan, locking onto Bellamy, who still stood a few feet from Idris. You're not taking anyone out of this room without a warrant, Elliot said. Not like this. Driscoll let out a short laugh from the side of the classroom. Here we go. Bellamy didn't look at Elliot right away. His focus stayed on Idris, like Elliot wasn't worth acknowledging yet. This doesn't concern you, Bellamy said. It does, Elliot replied immediately. You're inside a school. You're in his classroom. It concerns everyone. A student near the back raised their phone higher this time. Another followed, quiet but noticeable. Ryan shifted, noticing the phones. His hand hovered near his belt, not drawing anything, but enough to signal control. Put those down, he said, scanning the room. Now. No one moved. Elliot took a step forward. You're not going to intimidate them. You already forced your way in here. Now you're giving orders to students? Driscoll's patience snapped first. He moved in fast, closing the distance with Elliot. Listen, he said, low but sharp. You're about 2 seconds from making this a lot worse for yourself. Elliot didn't move. Then show a warrant or get out. That was it. Driscoll reached out and shoved Elliot hard in the chest. The impact pushed him back a step, but he caught himself, feet sliding against the floor. A few students gasped. Idris moved instinctively, stepping forward slightly. Hey! Ryan reacted immediately, stepping fully in and raising an arm to block Idris. Stay where you are. Elliot straightened, breathing heavier now, but still standing his ground. You just put your hands on me. In front of students. You think that's okay? Driscoll stepped closer again, this time not stopping. You think you're in charge here? You think this is your space? It is, Elliot replied, not yours. Bellamy finally turned his attention fully to Elliot. There was a pause, short but heavy. Then Bellamy nodded once. That was all Driscoll needed. He grabbed Elliot by the arm and twisted, forcing him sideways towards the wall just outside the doorway. "Hey!" a student shouted. The sound of shoes scraping against the floor echoed again as Elliot tried to resist, not swinging, not fighting, just trying to stay upright. "You don't get to block us," Driscoll said through his teeth, forcing Elliot's shoulder into the wall. Ryan stepped in to assist, pinning Elliot's other arm. Inside the classroom, everything had stopped. No one was writing, no one was speaking, just watching. Idris stood still, eyes fixed on Elliot being restrained just feet away. "Let him go," Idris said. Bellamy didn't look at Elliot. He looked at Idris, then he stepped forward again. "Now we're done asking." And this time, he didn't reach slowly. He lunged forward and grabbed Idris by the arm, tight. "Move." Idris didn't resist, but he didn't rush either. He held his ground just long enough to say one thing: "You're doing this without authority." Bellamy leaned in slightly, voice just above a whisper. "You people always say that." Then he pulled, and the entire classroom watched as Idris Mathers was dragged towards the door. Bellamy pulled Idris toward the door. The room broke. Chairs shifted. A few students stood up without realizing it. Someone said, "Stop," but didn't finish. Phones were fully up now, no one hiding it anymore. "Sit down," Ryan barked from the doorway, still holding Elliot Harrow pinned against the wall. His forearm pressed across Elliot's upper back, keeping him in place. Idris twisted his head enough to see inside the classroom. "Idris, don't say anything else," he called out, voice strained. "They don't have a warrant." Driscoll tightened his grip on Elliot's arm. "You really don't know when to stop," he muttered. Inside the room, Idris walked under Bellamy's control, not resisting, but not helping either. His arm was held tight, fingers digging into his sleeve. "Watch your grip," Idris said, controlled. "You're not escorting, you're forcing." Bellamy didn't respond. He guided, no, shoved Idris forward. As they reached the doorway, Idris stopped just enough to look at Elliot. "You good?" he asked. Elliot let out a breath through clenched teeth. "I'm fine. They're not." Ryan shifted, pushing Elliot harder into the wall, face forward. From inside the classroom, a student spoke up, voice shaking. "You can't take him like that. He didn't do anything." Driscoll turned his head toward the room, irritation clear. "You want to join him?" he snapped. Silence. Another student lowered their phone slightly but didn't stop recording. Idris caught that. He looked back at the class. "Stay calm. Stay in your seats." Bellamy tugged his arm again. "Keep moving." They stepped into the hallway. The difference was immediate. More doors were open now, teachers standing in thresholds, students peeking out, whispering, pulling back, then looking again. The noise had spread. "What's going on?" someone asked down the hall. "No idea," another replied. Grace Whitfield was already moving toward them from the far end, her pace quick, expression tight. "What is this?" she demanded as she approached. "Who authorized you to be in this building?" Bellamy didn't slow down. "Federal business," he said. "That doesn't override school protocol," Grace shot back. "You need to identify yourselves, now." No response. She stepped in front of them. "I'm not asking again." For a second, the hallway stalled. Bellamy stopped just long enough to look at her. "Move." "No," Grace said. Driscoll glanced at Ryan, then back at Bellamy. The tension shifted again, quicker this time. "Don't do this," Grace added, lower now but firm. "You're accelerating this for no reason." Bellamy didn't raise his voice. "You're interfering." "I'm protecting my staff." Another pause. Then Bellamy reached out, not to strike, but to move her. Firm, direct, enough to push her out of his path. A few teachers reacted immediately, "Hey!" but no one stepped in close enough to stop it. Idris saw it all, said nothing. They kept moving. Behind them, Elliot was finally released, stumbling forward as Ryan let go. He caught himself against the wall, then pushed off, moving after them. "You're not walking out of here with him," Elliot called out, louder now, closing distance. Ryan turned, stepping into his path again. "That's exactly what we're doing." Elliot didn't stop walking, not without showing authority. Driscoll shifted his stance, ready again. And at the end of the hallway, 2 more agents appeared, blocking the exit. Elliot slowed slightly, not stopping, just realizing this wasn't just an arrest, it was planned. Elliot Harrow saw it in the way the 2 additional agents positioned themselves at the end of the hallway, shoulders squared, stance wide, already anticipating resistance. Not reacting, waiting. "Move," one of them said as Elliot approached. Elliot didn't stop walking. "You're not taking him out of this building like this." Behind him, Bellamy kept Idris moving forward, grip still tight, pace steady. Idris didn't fight it, but his eyes stayed active, tracking everything, every face, every movement. Grace Whitfield stepped in again from the side, voice sharper now. "You're done. This ends here. You don't have clearance to remove anyone from this campus." Bellamy didn't break stride. "Last warning," he said. "To who?" Grace shot back. "You're the one in violation." Driscoll moved slightly ahead now, angling his body between Grace and Idris. "You need to step back," he said. "No," Grace replied. That was enough. Driscoll raised his hand and shoved her, not hard enough to knock her down, but enough to force her backward out of the path. A teacher nearby grabbed her arm to steady her. "What are you doing?" someone yelled from down the hall. Phones were everywhere now, no one hiding it. Students, staff, recording from every angle. Elliot closed the remaining distance. "You've pushed staff, restrained me, entered classrooms," he said, voice rising now, controlled but loud, "and you still haven't shown a warrant." Ryan stepped directly into him again. "You're in the way." Elliot held his ground. "That's the point." For a second, neither of them moved. Then Ryan leaned in slightly, voice low. "You don't want to make this about you." Elliot didn't back off. Too late. Behind them, Idris spoke, calm, measured. "Elliot." Elliot glanced back. "Let it happen," Idris said. "Just keep watching." That landed. Elliot's jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. Bellamy used that moment. "Move," he repeated, pulling Idris forward again. They reached the final stretch of the hallway, the glass panels reflecting the scene back at them. Outside, through the glass, 2 unmarked SUVs sat parked close to the curb, engines running. Idris noticed that. Already running. Driscoll opened one of the doors. Cold air hit immediately. A few students had followed at a distance now, keeping space but not leaving. One voice cut through, shaky but loud. "He didn't do anything." Bellamy didn't turn. "Stay inside," he said. Idris stepped through the doorway. No resistance, no struggle, just compliance. But his voice carried clearly as he crossed the threshold. "This is being recorded." Bellamy gave a slight nod, almost like he expected that. "Good," he said. Outside, the agents moved fast. Ryan opened the rear door of the SUV. Driscoll positioned himself between Idris and the small crowd forming near the entrance. "Back up," he ordered. Elliot reached the doorway just as they guided Idris toward the vehicle. "You're making a mistake," Elliot called out. Bellamy paused long enough to look back at him. "No, we're correcting one." Then he forced Idris down into the back seat. The door slammed shut, and the engine revved slightly, just as a voice from behind Elliot shouted, "The police are on the way!" The words carried across the parking lot just as the SUV doors shut. For a second, no one moved. Then Bellamy turned his head slightly toward the voice, eyes scanning. calculating. Driscoll glanced back toward the school entrance where staff and students had gathered, phones still up, recording everything. Ryan was already in the driver's seat. "Go," Bellamy said. The SUV pulled off fast, too fast for a school zone, tires rolling hard over the curb before correcting onto the street. The second vehicle followed immediately behind it. Elliot Harrow stepped out onto the pavement, stopping just short of the curb, watching them disappear down the road. He didn't say anything. Behind him, Grace Whitfield was already on the phone. "Yes, they've left," she said, pacing. "No, they didn't identify themselves. No warrant. They forced entry into classrooms. Yes, students witnessed everything." She stopped, listening. "Yes," she added, "we have video." Elliot turned back toward the building. Students were still gathered near the entrance, some shaken, others talking all at once. "Everyone back inside," Grace called out, regaining control. "Now." They didn't move right away. "They just took him," one student said. "Like, just took him." "I know," Grace replied. "We'll handle it. Go back to your classrooms." Elliot stepped past them, heading inside. His breathing had slowed, but his hands were still tense at his sides. Grant Harper caught up with him halfway down the hallway. "You all right?" Grant asked. Elliot nodded once. "You saw it?" "Yeah, everyone saw it." Elliot looked back toward the entrance. "They planned that," he said quietly. Grant didn't respond. 2 days later, the footage was everywhere. Multiple angles, clear audio, every moment from the hallway to the classroom to the parking lot. Students had recorded it, staff had recorded it, even partial security footage from inside the building had surfaced. And none of it looked controlled. It looked rushed, aggressive, unchecked. Inside an office downtown, Marcellus Carver stood near a conference table reviewing one of the clips on a tablet. The audio played low, but the words were clear enough. "No warrant. Step aside. You people always say that." Carver paused the video. Across from him, Edward Shaw sat with a file open, flipping through printed stills pulled from the recordings. They entered a restricted educational facility. During active instruction, no judicial authorization, no identification presented. Carver nodded slightly, and they laid hands on staff. "Multiple times," Shaw added, "and removed a U.S. citizen." That was the part that had just been confirmed. Idris Mathers, natural-born citizen, no outstanding warrants, no legal basis for detention. Carver set the tablet down. "They didn't verify before they acted." "No, they assumed," replied Shaw. Carver looked back at the paused screen, Bellamy's hand gripping Idris's arm. "That assumption," he said, "just turned into liability." Shaw closed the file. "It's more than that," he said. "This is a civil rights violation." A brief silence settled in the room. Then Carver gave a small nod. "Then we treat it like one." Across town, Elliot stood in the same classroom, empty now. He looked at the spot near the door where everything started, then back at the desks, still arranged the same way. Nothing else had changed, except now everyone knew what had happened inside that room, and outside, it was already getting bigger. By the start of the next week, the footage had spread beyond Spokane. Local coverage turned national. Every clip showed the same sequence: forced entry, no identification, staff restrained, a teacher taken in front of students. No warrant, no explanation. Inside a federal courtroom, the tone was different: controlled, precise, recorded. Idris Mathers sat at the plaintiff's table, posture straight, hands folded. He hadn't said much since the incident. He didn't need to. The video said enough. Across the room, Travis Bellamy and the other agents sat with counsel. No masks now, no urgency, just stillness. Marcellus Carver stood first. "This is not a question of enforcement," he said, measured. "It's a question of conduct. The defendants entered a public school without judicial authorization, ignored direct requests for identification, used physical force against staff, and detained a U.S. citizen without probable cause. He let that sit. Edward Shaw followed, stepping closer to the screen as a clip was played again, Elliot Harrow being shoved, Idris pulled from his classroom. "You'll notice," Shaw said, "there is no moment, none, where a warrant is presented, not before entry, not during, not after." He paused the video on Bellamy's hand gripping Idris's arm. This wasn't a mistake, this was a decision. The defense argued protocol, urgency, misidentification, but the footage didn't support it. Every angle showed the same thing: control without authority. When Elliot Harrow was called, he didn't over-explain. "They came in like they didn't have to answer to anyone," he said, "like no one in that building had the right to question them." "And did they?" Shaw asked. "No, they didn't." Grace Whitfield's testimony matched. So did Grant Harper's. Even student recordings were entered into evidence. Then came the confirmation that settled everything. Idris Mathers, natural-born U.S. citizen. No warrants, no flags, no legal justification for detention. Carver didn't raise his voice when he addressed the court again. They didn't verify, they assumed. The courtroom stayed quiet, because that part was clear. The ruling came down days later: violation of civil rights, unlawful entry, excessive force. Liability established. Damages awarded. $14.2 million. No reaction from Idris when it was read, just a slow exhale. Across the room, Bellamy stared forward, expression unchanged, but the outcome was final. Outside the courthouse, Elliot stood beside Idris. "You good?" Elliot asked. Idris nodded once. "I am now." There was no celebration, no speeches, just closure. Back in Spokane, room 214 looked the same. Desks aligned, board clean, light coming through the same windows. But what happened there didn't stay there. People saw it, recorded it, and held it up until it couldn't be ignored. If you made it this far, you already know stories like this don't get attention unless people keep watching and sharing them. Subscribe to the channel for more documented stories where actions have consequences and nothing gets brushed aside.